effects of dialect rule in Tanganyika. So after the Germans applying this kind of rule in Tanganyika, how did it impact the people of Tanganyika? So many of the African chiefs lost their powers and they were replaced by the harsh Akdas and Jumbes. So the Akdas and Jumbes replaced many of the African chiefs or leaders. The Germans, after taking over Tanganyika, they saw Africans as useless. They could not move with them anymore, or they could not allow them to govern with them because they always looked at them as people who were below them. So what they did, they employed the Akdas and Jumbes to come and replace them. Therefore, at the end of the day, Africans ended up losing their leadership, their positions, their powers to the Akdas and Jumbes who were harsh. Another effect of the German rule in Tanganyika, Africans who were cooperative and loyal to the Germans were appointed as the Akdas and as Jumbes. So Africans that were too royal and they had accepted the German rule in Tanganyika were further employed, were given opportunity, were now appointed by the Germans to come and help them in the administration. So dialect rule brought widespread of rebellions as many people, Africans, rose up against the harsh Akdas and Jumbes. Igi, we have the Majimaji revolt, Abushiri revolt, and the Hehe rebellion. So many Africans responded towards the German rule negatively in form of resistances. So the German rule, dialect rule in Tanganyika led to the rise or the outbreak of several revolutions or rebellions or conflicts in Tanganyika. A good example is the Majimaji rebellion of 1905 and the Abushir revolt under the leadership of Abushir himself. We have the Hehe under Chifunkwawa. So all these revolutions resulted due to the dialect rule employed by the Germans in Tanganyika. So we see that there was rise of African nationalism because many people started now to organize themselves into revolutionary movements to struggle for their independence. The word nationalism means that is love someone has for his or her country. So the love for Africans towards their territories increased after them losing power to the white man, and because of that loss, they ended up mobilizing themselves into groups or revolutionary movements to claim for their powers that were taken away by the white man. So this led to the growth of nationalism among the Africans. Another one, heavy taxation was witnessed during the introduction of the electoral in Tanganyika. Hard taxes were introduced whereby a person, the moment you made 18 years, you had to pay 3 rupees per heart. So taxes were brutally corrected by the German representatives in Africa, and for them to get maximum profits from Africans, new taxes were introduced and the Africans were made to pay high taxes. So some of the Africans saw this as something that was irrelevant or uncalled for in Africa. So what they did, they organized themselves into different groups to fight against the German act of introducing taxes. So heavy taxation was introduced, and the methods that they used to do this kind of taxation was brutal. So the brutal methods employed by the Germans led to African revolts at the end of the day. Still, there was forced cash crop growing introduced by the Germans in Tanganyika. So many of the Africans were forced to grow different cash crops. For example, we have cotton, coffee, tea, tobacco, and many others. So these were forced by the Germans to Africans. So many Africans were forced to plant these cash crops, making them to leave their food crops to embark on cash crops, which later on created a famine in Africa. People started now to focus on cash crops, which could take long time to mature, and at the end of the day, they did not even know the ending products from these cash crops. So many of the Africans did not understand what really was coming out of coffee. Many of them did not understand what was really coming out of cotton. At the end of the day, many Africans became dependents of the German. And still on the same point, many of the Germans used to force Africans, beating them up, forcing them to plant coffee, forcing them to plant cotton, and at the end of the day, many of the Africans ended up becoming slaves of the Germans at the end of the day. So another one, there was culture and custom erosion. So the African culture and customs were eroded and abused by the Akdas and Jumbes. They were raped on side of women. Women were raped. Their husbands were overworking. They were overworked by the Germans on cotton and coffee plantations. This thing annoyed many of the African groups like the Wangitos and Watumbis, who later on organized the revolutions against the German rule in Tanganyika. So to worsen the situation, the German representatives in Tanganyika could enter with shoes, or could enter their shoes in the mosques, and the Africans used to treasure such holy places. They could enter their shoes in the shrines, something that was against the African culture. They used to enter dogs in the African shrines or places of worship. So such things annoyed Africans to the extent of picking arms to revolt against the ruling or colonialism. Lastly, people were always in a state of suffering, as there was widely spread of discontent in terms and the resentment against the Akdas and Jumbes generally in the whole German administration. There was discrimination. So the Germans focused much on things that were helping them or were benefiting them, and they neglected those that were helping the Africans. So Africans in terms of development were always left out. The German officials were corrupt, the Akdas and Jumbes. They used to use their offices in a wrong way, enforcing Africans into slavery, overtaxing them, using brutal methods. Such things annoyed Africans